Hello everyone, we have with us Dr. Sandeep Kulkarni at the Fireside chat session. He will share with us his views and insights on the significance of recycling in improving sustainability and developing circular packaging systems. Dr. Sandeep is the founder and president of Cool Earth Solutions, a technical consulting and business development company focused on helping companies develop and commercialize new sustainable packaging solutions. He is a technical consultant at the Association of Plastic Recyclers, responsible for managing and administering the APR Design for Recyclability recognition programs. He is also Vice President, Plastics and Packaging at Ubuntu, a unique environmental solutions platform to address plastic waste, food waste, sustainable fashion, and so on. Dr. Sandeep has over 25 years of industry experience working for several large packaging companies. Most recently, he worked for PepsiCo in the area of sustainable beverage packaging. His diverse expertise includes plastics recycling, bioplastics, and paper-based packaging. Dr. Sandeep, thank you so much for joining us here today. Could you please share your thoughts on the implications of the present way of dealing with packaging materials? And in your view, what is the importance of recycling these materials in terms of achieving sustainability?
Great. Thank you for that question, Swaleha. I think the present way of dealing with materials, particularly packaging, is what's called a linear. It's called, and it really kind of take you make the packaging, you use it, and at the end of the day, you dispose it off. So it's a very linear way of thinking about what happens to the packaging after its useful life. But I think what countries and governments are realizing is that that's not a sustainable way going forward, because there are issues such as litter and pollution and plastics ending up in the ocean and so on. So I think there is a need to rethink that linear way of working with packaging and plastics in general. And so that's why there's a big focus going forward on what's called circular economy or circularity, where materials can be kept in a circular flow so that nothing gets wasted. They can be used over and over again. And I think that's where recycling plays a big role, because when you are able to recycle a package, let's say a bottle, after you're done with the water or whatever is in the bottle, after you're done with it, you can recycle it back to another bottle, or you can recycle it into something else, like maybe a piece of clothing and so on. So it doesn't lose its value at the end of the day. You're continuously reusing it, at least for several times before it becomes non-usable. So I think circularity is a big piece of sustainability going forward. And I think that's going to be very critical that we think of things in a circular economy sense.
So as you just mentioned, for a long time, the thinking has been linear, with everyone predominantly, adopting the cradle to grave approach. But surely the things have been changing over the past few years, with people looking at the cradle to cradle model in a serious manner, with increasing focus on recycling to put the materials back in the cycle. Now, in your view, is recycling the only answer to issues related to end-of-life plastics, particularly packaging materials? And what are the other measures that could help achieve sustainability?
So recycling is definitely one piece of the puzzle. Of course, we have all been taught the 3 R's, right? Reduce, reuse, and recycle. So I think you have to look at it holistically. Like I said, recycling is one piece, but there are other things you can do also. There is the reuse portion, which means there is packaging that can be potentially used many times over. So there's a growing movement towards reusable cups, for instance. I think a lot of, in different parts of the world, coffee shops or other types of fast food chains are actually introducing reusable cups, reusable cutlery, and so on, which can be either cleaned and returned and used many times over. And then, of course, overall reduction is important, because I think the amount of packaging that's going into the system is huge. So if there's ways to optimize the amount of packaging needed, maybe potentially reduce the overall quantity, that will go a long way as well. So I think all these 3 R's have to be taken in a holistic sense. So one piece of that will not solve the problem. So I think you have to look at, as I said, reduce, reuse, recycle. So it has to be tackled in that sense.
Right. So what are the major global drivers for the focus on a circular economy of plastics?
Well, there are several major drivers, but I'll focus on 3 big ones that are really driving circular economy. The first one is just the overall understanding of the public awareness that this is becoming an issue. So as you see, we have pictures of plastics being littered, plastics in the ocean, and so on. So I think there's a hyper awareness right now in terms of the public that it is an issue and it has to be tackled. The second thing that's happening is that major corporations, if you think of the large multinational companies, whether it's like a Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, Unilever, they have set some very aggressive goals to meet, whether it's in terms of recycling or reduction of plastics, or maybe even introducing compostable materials and so on. And so I think a lot of that is driving the focus on circularity and on sustainability going forward. And then the third piece that I think is also very critical is legislations and regulations that are coming into focus. So major governments or global governments are really focusing very heavily on ways to tackle the issues with pollution and so on. So there are things like plastic bans, there are extended producer responsibility regulations that are coming into play. And that's playing a big role in driving circularity of plastics. And in fact, in the United States, where I live, for a long time we didn't have a lot of regulation. It was not considered to be of importance. But as you have probably seen in the last year, a lot of the states here have started implementing legislations and regulations. So I think it's a growing trend, and it'll only keep accelerating in the coming years.
So do you think legislation is the only way that things could happen, or things will fall in place, or are any other initiatives that could help with the process?
I mean, legislation is certainly one big piece if it's written in the right way, if the right kind of legislations are put in place, that can go a long way. For instance, there are things with like bottle bills and extended producer responsibility and so on that can play a big role. Of course, in addition to that, you do need an increase in the infrastructure. So if you want to grow recycling, you have to be able to invest in the infrastructure to collect materials, to sort materials, and to recycle them. And I think the third thing that really is important is the education piece, because in addition to everything that you do, the public has to be made aware of what needs to be done, how they can handle the packaging or the plastics at the end of the day, what is the proper way to either recycle them or dispose of them. So I think regulations, the infrastructure growth, and education all have to go hand in hand to really, I think, speed up the growth of circular economy globally.
Right. So you did mention bans that are being talked about, and some places they are implementing those bans, but and also considering the demand from the public now for sustainable packaging, do you think banning plastic is useful, or is it the right thing to do?
So I'm not in favor of like a blanket ban on plastics. There may be areas where I know that there may be certain types of plastics that may not be needed. I know that in like certain types of island nations, for instance, I think single-use items can be problematic. So I think there are ways to deal with that. But I don't, like I said, I don't believe like a blanket ban on plastics is the answer. I think we need to, again, going back to my initial comment, I think we need to really focus on all those three R's. It's not one size fits all solution. You have to look at reduction as well as reuse and recycling as kind of the holistic answer. So I think it has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And again, there are some places where I think plastics play a major role in terms of food protection and increasing the shelf life of products. So I think you have to kind of look at the whole situation. The other part of the equation is looking at the greenhouse gas impact. So let's say you eliminate a plastic from a package, but you reduce the shelf life by maybe like 10 days or 20 days. The food waste that it causes can have a much bigger impact, a carbon impact, compared to the small amount of plastic that you're taking out. So again, you have to look at it in a holistic sense, not just focus on one.
Right. There are actually talking of single-use plastics, particularly, there are in this region also in some countries they've started the bans on single-use items, like certain particular they've specified the materials as well. Now, what is the state in the US with regard to plastics, single-use plastics in particular?
So it's kind of a mixed bag. In some ways, there are some states that have instituted bans on certain types of plastics. So, for instance, plastic bags. States like New York and so on have actually implemented a ban on the single-use plastic bags, like carry bags in supermarkets. There are other states which don't have anything like that, or in fact are resisting those type of bans. But I think overall, there is, like I said, a bigger and bigger focus on regulations where you can drive more collection and recycling of a lot of these materials. So I think at least in the US, the focus is more towards sort of what can be done at the end of the day with some of these materials.
Right. So talking of commitments versus execution, now, where do major brands and other relevant entities stand? What are the key driving factors and bottlenecks that also need to be overcome for targets to be achieved in terms of recycling packaging materials and achieving sustainability?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, like I said in the beginning, a lot of the multinational companies have announced these very aggressive targets to reach 100% recyclable packaging or compostable packaging or a combination of those type of things. And a lot of them have targeted the year 2025 as the year by which they want to reach those targets. I think we are now in 2022, so we're only about 3 years away. And what we are finding is a lot of those targets may be very hard to meet. And one of the big reasons is, for instance, let's say a commitment to use more recycled plastics in their packaging. I think the big challenge is the availability of recycled plastic is very limited right now. And to be able to really implement larger and larger quantities of recycled materials, you have to really grow the infrastructure, the collection, and so on. So, like I said, I think companies are starting to realize that they really need to put a big push on a lot of these activities. And that is why things like the Plastics Pact and some of these organizations are really working very hard to drive the whole supply chain, not one piece of it. So I think it's going to be difficult, but I think if companies work together and really collaborate, it can be achieved. So, but it is a long road ahead for sure.
Right. So what role you're associated with the Association of Plastic Recyclers, APR. So what role does the Association of Plastic Recyclers play in helping increase plastic packaging recycling and achieving circularity in this segment?
So the Association of Plastic Recyclers, or the APR, is actually probably the premier or the only organization in the US representing the plastic industry. So we like to call ourselves the voice of the plastic industry. And what we do is we work on several different fronts. One is we have programs which recognize packaging that has been designed for recyclability, so that we are actually helping companies appropriately design their packaging. So at the end of the day, it can be recycled using the existing facilities and infrastructure. So there are design recognition programs that we run. We also have something called a Demand Champions program, where we encourage companies to use more and more recycled material, because at the end of the day, if there is nobody who wants to take the recycled plastic and make something out of it, it doesn't work out. So we have a program to drive or to encourage companies to use more recycled plastic. We also have a certification program where we can actually certify that a company is using so much percentage of recycled plastic in their packaging. And finally, we are a centralized sort of a repository of information on everything related to recycling. So what we try to do is play a role where industry can come to us and look at the APR as a central body that can provide answers, and also some of these resources helping increase recycling in the US, but now globally. We have now member companies that are all over the world, so our reach is increasing across the world.
Just one thing, like when we talk of circular economy now, what does it mean, especially for plastic, and where do we stand in terms of taking steps to achieve a circular economy in this particular segment?
So when you talk about circular economy, actually what it really means is keeping the material at its highest use possible for as many cycles as possible. So if you think of, like I said, I gave an example of a plastic bottle that's used for, let's say, water. If you're able to use or recycle it back into a new plastic bottle that can be used for the same type of application or similar application, I would say that's the highest possible use. If you plastic bottle and let's say put it into a park bench or some sort of a road application, I would call that essentially downcycling. So from my perspective, as long as the material can be used in its highest possible value application for as many times as possible, that would be circular economy. And I think that's where a lot of focus is going into right now.
Right. So then in that case, where are the gaps actually in the international models when it comes to actually closing the loop?
So I think one of the biggest gaps is really in terms of the supply or the collection, because I think what is happening is one of the big problems is when the material is collected and sent to a recycler, a lot of times it's very contaminated because people don't have a very good idea what should go into the recycling bin, for instance. So I think education and making sure that you're collecting larger amounts, but also less contaminated feed stream, I think will go a long way towards driving more recycling or a better quality of recycling materials.
Right. Any other comments from your side?
I think one, I would mention that again, I think the recycling industry is definitely is a prominent industry worldwide. There's been some implications recently that recycling doesn't work, or there's it's sort of, I guess, greenwash. But I would say that given the amount of work that's going on worldwide, there is definitely a great future for the recycling industry. But again, as I said, it has to be taken in context with the overall picture. So again, the 3 R's are important, as I said. You can't just focus on any one piece of it and hope to solve the problem.
Right. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Sandeep. I believe you've shared some very pertinent aspects and insights related to the topic. So thank you again for joining us here today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.